The Orgone energy accumulator represents the central development of orgonomy, the science of cosmic original life energy, or orgone energy, as Reich called it after he discovered and scientifically defined it. Today, more than 80 years later, the functioning and possible applications are still largely unknown to the general public. Those who are familiar with the name Wilhelm Reich generally know that Reich did research on orgone energy, but often not much more. This chapter is therefore intended to explain the basic functions of orgone energy and the orgone energy accumulator. Reich discovered an elemental energy, the cosmic primordial energy, which exists before any formation of matter and which in combination with solid matter or water constitutes life. Therefore he referred to it as life energy and called it orgone, referring to the terms organic or orgasm. He consciously distinguished it from other energy concepts such as chi, ether, prana, or odd, as these terms were affiliated with further ideologies and those not defined more scientifically. Reich was active as a psychoanalyst in Freud's circle as a young man. At the age of 22, from the outset he was concerned with the sexual function and regarded the Freudian concept of divine energy, the libido, not only as a linguistic metaphor like most of his colleagues, but from the outset as an energy in the physical sense, which also had to be demonstrable accordingly. It was only years later, after he had largely separated himself from traditional psychoanalysis, that he carried out sensational experiments in Norway. At the end of the 1930s, he sought to prove with his experiments that the libido is an electrical body energy, demonstrating clear electrical voltage changes in lust and fear reactions. The electrical model didn't satisfy him, however, because the bioelectricity that was proven responded to the emotional reactions, and could not be considered as the organism's sole source of energy because of its relatively small quantity. At the same time, Reich undertook his so-called bion experiments in Norway. He found that the protozoa form spontaneously from hay, sand, soil, and all kinds of chemical substances when the material decomposes, through the effects of heat for example, and is mixed with water. According to Reich's observations, the formation of the protozoa does not occur via air germs, as classical biology unprovenly postulates, but in a bubble-like decay of the substances, which spontaneously cluster together into heaps and which begin an autonomous movement. These bubbles, which Reich called bions, form a preliminary form of living beings. Classifiable unicellular organisms emerge from them in a further development step. Since all organic matter decays into bion forms when it dies, Reich assumed that microorganisms are in a constant state of form transition, i.e. that even within a living organism, single-celled organisms such as bacteria, fungi, or protozoa are constantly emerging. In his time, such ideas were considered absurd, and famous bacteriologists tried to ridicule Reich publicly, which they succeeded in doing in Norway. This decisively contributed to Reich having to abandon his bion research and his bioelectrical experiments and move to the US. Today, Reich's biological ideas, which were revolutionary at the time, are still not generally accepted. But there are growing numbers of natural scientists who have confirmed Reich's discoveries in other ways. The transitions of different organisms, such as the emergence of bacteria from decaying fungi, is now scientifically discussed as pleomorphism and is accepted in wide circles. In the rooms where Reich observed his experiments, he noticed a bluish radiation. Reich wanted to exclude the possibility that these were electromagnetic waves and placed the preparations in metal boxes, Faraday cages, that were insulated on the outside with wood. Here, however, this radiation phenomena became more intense, and it remained visible even without the preparation in the boxes. In a wooden box without an inner metal layer, the radiation phenomena were not visible. Moreover, this energy had clear organismic reactions. For example, his skin reddened slightly when he placed the preparations on a quartz glass slide, and then placed the prepared slide onto his skin for some time. Reich and others who observed bion cultures microscopically contracted conjunctivitis. Much later, when Reich discovered these phenomena in the atmosphere, he assumed an independent physical energy. From Myron Sharaf's book Fury on Earth, the following is mentioned. In Maine, Reich began looking at individual stars through a wooden tube. By chance, he pointed the tube at a dark space between the stars. To his surprise, he noticed a vivid flicker, then flashes of fine light. The closer he got to the moon, the less intense the phenomena appeared. They were most pronounced in the darkest parts of the sky between the stars. However, these experiments were never conclusive enough to stand up to critical scrutiny. Reich's method of cognition differed fundamentally from the prevailing mechanistic mystical view of nature. He called it energetic biofunctionalism. It is the method of looking at nature through the fundamental point of view of the living, not seeing it rigidly, mechanistically, like a machine or an automatic process, or mystically, i.e., projecting nature functions into supersensibility, spiritual or divine realms. Energetic functionalism includes the natural functions of the observing being, i.e. the researching human being in the observation. The natural feeling scientist, therefore, understands his own organism. Feeling and emotions are the most important tools with which he comprehends nature. Therefore, he must keep his biological functions and his natural ability to preserve and express in order, just as he does with tools with which he works. A person who is afraid of his own vital functions will have a difficult time looking at himself from a naturistic point of view, and will tend to adopt and hold the rigid, mechanical concepts about natural functions, and he will repress everything he can't explain to himself in this way into mystical realms of faith. The observations at the lake signified a moment of supreme realization for Reich. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe unreservedly that he was observing a radiation that was independent of the Sapper cultures, and, although he could prove it with nothing, independent of subjective light phenomena. It was only when he felt that he was dealing with an energy outside of the body, indeed outside matter altogether, that he could separate himself from the more conventional terminology of an energy in the body, libido, bioelectricity, and call his discovery Orgone energy. Moreover, the experience at the lake represented the sharpest possible contrast to science of the time. Only 10 months later, on the 11th of October 1939, Roosevelt had received the letter from Einstein urging the development of an atomic bomb, since Hitler was most probably working with all his might in the same direction. This letter set the historic Los Alamos project in motion, and Reich fought his lonely battle with the most primitive equipment, and with silly observations in dark cellars and over a lake. He often highlighted the contrast. On one hand, the overwhelming intellectual and technical effort devoted to the death ray, and on the other, the primitive means with which he set out to discover the life ray, without any outside help. Nevertheless, this contrast should not obscure the fact that there are great similarities between Reich's approach and traditional science. Reich was not inferior to any other scientist in his efforts to make objective measurements. His visual observations certainly could not stand as a decisive experiment, so he would soon turn to verifiable hypotheses and repeatable experiments. The brief overview of major events in orgonomy aims to explain the background leading to the creation of the Orgone energy accumulator. This scientific field was so extensive that, according to Reich, no scientist had been able to conduct research that is even remotely broad. Due to the challenging access to orgonomy through self-understanding of biological functions, particularly sexuality, few scientists fully supported Reich's conclusions. Observable functions of Orgone energy. The Orgone energy surrounds everything. All living beings consist of it. In connection with solid matter and water, it makes up the part that gives life to matter. People live in such dense connection with this energy that they hardly perceive it spontaneously and find it difficult to recognize the Orgone functions separately from themselves. Orgone flickering. People typically refer to the wavy shimmer or trembling seen above roads, lakes, or mountain tops, typically visible with binoculars or photographic lenses, as heat waves. However, their function has nothing to do with heat. They appear even at 30 degrees below zero and are not discernible on some hot days. Heat waves, as heated air rises, would rise from the bottom up. This phenomena can be observed on a heated cooker top. but the waves move from west to east in the direction of the Earth's magnetic current, only faster than it. Moving air is not visible. Wind can only be seen through moving things like leaves or swirling sand. At this moment, the movement of the Earth's orgone field is visible. Sky blue. According to Reich, blue is the specific colour of orgone energy inside and outside the organism. The blue of the sky is the orgone energy shimmering in the atmosphere. Where there is DOR, a solidified form of orgone in the atmosphere, it shines no more. DOR appears in the deserts as dark layers resembling smoke or exhaust. The green of plants is composed of the earthly yellow-brown colours of the planet material and the blue of orgone energy. If the life, the energy and the water withdraws from the green leaves, they turn yellow or brown. Although red blood cells are commonly known as red, they appear green when viewed under the microscope while blood is alive. Fireflies and luminescent wood glow blue, as do St. Elmo's fire and the Northern Lights. Observations of orgone energy in a dark room lined with metal, an orgone room, shows that spontaneously glowing bluish swathes fill the room. How the orgone energy accumulator functions. A disclaimer going forward, nothing I'm about to say is meant to replace medical advice. Don't chance your health on this. From the Orgone Energy Accumulator by Wilhelm Reich. The Orgone Energy Accumulator is a device materially arranged in a way that life energy present in the atmosphere of our planet can be captured, accumulated, and used for scientific, educational, and medical purposes. From the discovery of orgone, the Big C biopathy from Wilhelm Reich. This mechanism of concentration is based on two facts. Organic matter of any kind attracts orgone to itself and holds it. Conversely, orgone-containing material attracts small organic particles and holds them. Metallic metals, especially iron, attracts orgone but quickly repels it. Conversely, orgone-charged metal repels metallic particles. Although in principle organic matter attracts orgone, this also applies to a whole range of substances that are considered inorganic in the chemical-physical sense, yet they have this property. Reich says that materials are a good insulator of electrical energy, or what amounts to the same, a poor conductor of electricity is well capable of absorbing orgone energy. These properties of metal and insulator are applied in the orgone energy accumulator using insulator on the outside and metal on the inside. Through this arrangement, orgone is absorbed and stored on the outside, and absorbed and quickly passed on by the metal on the inside. Due to the arrangement of the materials, the repulsion occurs mainly in the inner space. If metal and insulator are placed in several layers one after another, always metal inside and insulator outside, the ability of the device to concentrate orgone energy is increased. One layer of metal and the insulator is called the double layer. The more double layers an orgone energy accumulator has, the more it accumulates orgone. For the strength of the accumulation, a whole range of factors are of decisive importance in addition to the numbers of the layers of the unit. The orgone charge of the atmosphere. The near-Earth atmosphere is charged to very different degrees. Optimal is high charge in an area that has an accumulation of the cumulus clouds with a deep blue sky surrounding them. The charge is very low when the sky is pale blue or grey in colour, and no clouds or only blurry differentiable clouds can be seen in the area close to Earth. The humidity. Water binds orgone energy, and therefore the lower the relative humidity, the less the atmospheric energy is bound to water, i.e. freer. According to Reich, 40 to 50% relative humidity are good conditions for accumulation. The worst possibility would be 99 relative humidity, which would correspond to fog. The number of accumulators standing together. The more orgone energy accumulators there are in a building, especially if they are close together or even placed inside of each other, the stronger the effect of each accumulator. Reich had set up a room in his orgone laboratory as an orgone room. One chamber was completely lined with metal, and inside this large single-layer accumulator, there were many both medical orgone energy accumulators to sit in and experimental accumulators for physical and biological experiments and measurements. Each individual device had a stronger effect in the orgone room than alone in other surroundings. Organismic effects of the Orgone energy accumulator. The effects of the Orgone energy accumulator on organisms are based on certain biological and physical properties of Orgone energy. The orgonomic potential, the degree of charge of an energetic system, e.g. an organism or the atmosphere or an Orgone energy accumulator, always flows from the weaker to the stronger system. The Orgone energy accumulator is an artificial created energetic system. Through its arrangement in the form of an energy bubble, it forms an energy system that is quite like that of an organism. The Orgone energy accumulator thus enables the organism to absorb considerably more Orgone energy than would be possible without its use. There is no other method that would have similar or equal effects. Nevertheless, it can be said that other treatments also involve certain aspects of Orgone charging, including using a sauna, massage, acupuncture, or meditation. Often these treatments are about strengthening the body's own energy, energizing it, increasing its defenses. Only single aspects of the charge in the Orgone energy accumulator are ever addressed. The specifics of this charge, which also has specific effects, is the excitation and superposition of the two energy systems, which leads to the organism being able to absorb considerably more energy than without the apparatus. The experience that comes closest to this excitation of energy systems is the energetic fusion people have when spending a night together. Every organism has a certain optimal charging capacity, the ability to absorb a certain amount of Orgone energy. If the capacity is not filled, one speaks of orgotonic undercharging. If an organism is charged higher than its capacity requires, one speaks of overcharging. Both chronic undercharging and overcharging lead to biopathies. From Fury on Earth by Myron Sharaf, Reich used the term biopathy to cover a whole range of diseases such as the Big C, heart disease, and schizophrenia. He meant that the root cause of such degenerative diseases is the chronic underfunctioning of the organism's biological energy. These ailments must be distinguished from infectious or bacterial diseases, because the development of biopathies is mainly dependent on the emotional life of the patient. Reich considered the Orgone energy accumulator as possibly the most important weapon in the battle of healthcare. The orgotonic charge of the blood could lower the disposition to disease on a broad basis and combat many diseases based on weakened defences. It can only be assumed that most of the population is chronically undercharged, a small part chronically overcharged, and only very few people are energetically healthy. Lumination. The specific experience in the Orgone accumulator. The lumination, the energetic contact between the energy fields of the Orgone energy accumulator and the organism, is the specific sensual experience during the charge in the accumulator. A very pleasant, intimate feeling of expansion, which grips every single cell of the body and accordingly has versatile manifestations, from a slight tingling sensation on the skin, to stimulated intestinal activity, to cosmic feelings of flow, reminiscent of the deep fusion of intimacy, but also the feeling of being freshly in love, or of the first warming sun in spring. There are clear parallels between the feeling of sitting in a gentle spring sun and the feeling of orgotonic lumination in the Orgone energy accumulator. Not that one is the same as the other, or even that the two are interchangeable, but there is certainly similarity of bodily experience. What is the same is the feeling that something warm flows in and penetrates the organism from all sides and spreads to the last cell as a physical feeling of joy. Reich himself, like many others, used the Orgone energy accumulator because it was so much fun, not because it was sensible. Reich had a severe heart condition, and he was very highly charged, if not chronically overcharged, at least in the last few years after the Orgone experiment. So it may have been unreasonable of him to continue using the accumulator, and it is possible that he did not want to give up these incomparable sensual experiences. Extraordinary sensory impressions in the Orgone accumulator. Since nerve cells are also excited, there are special sensations at the level of all sensory experiences that can occur, but do not have to. These sensory experiences occur mainly in the first phase, when the organism has not yet reached its optimal charging capacity and the nervous system has not yet become accustomed to the regular high charge. Nerve cells only react to the change of the stimuli, i.e. the sudden appearance or absence of a sensory impression. Thus, in the Orgone energy accumulator, nerve cells may be stimulated and activated outside of their normal function. There are tingling, ticking and heat perceptions on the skin, flashes of light and a slight bluish glow in the dark accumulator, slight rushing in the ears, salty or electric taste on the tongue, and a distinct metallic, fresh smell. Each of these perceptions can also occur spontaneously without Orgone energy accumulators, as the spatial sudden high charge of individuals of the body can also occur naturally. Optimal charging and overcharging. Energy absorption always takes place, especially through the skin and through respiration. In situations where there is more free energy, i.e. in dry, clear weather, the organism can adapt to the higher atmospheric energy level. It instinctively exposes itself to the good weather by then liking to be outdoors and moving around. If there is less Orgone energy available in the atmosphere, i.e. in damp, cloudy weather, in fog and rain, it protects itself and tries to hold on to the stored energy as long as possible. This ability of the organism to adapt to the different energetic nature of the atmosphere leads to a higher charge in the Orgone energy accumulator. The process of charging is theoretically infinite. Practically, the organism reaches its limits at some point by developing the experience of overcharging. From the Orgone accumulator by Wilhelm Reich, this statement originates. A sensitive person will have had enough after some time. This is explained by the fact that, in a truly self-regulating way, the organism only absorbs as much Orgone energy as it needs. One should not compare Orgone exposures to mechanically filling a barrel with water. The idea that the more energy one pours into the organism, the better, is wrong. After a certain level has been reached, the perceptions become unpleasant. Pressure in the head, slight nausea, general malaise and dizziness are the most common signs that overcharging has begun. One simply leaves the Orgone accumulator and if one has had too much goes out in the fresh air and the signs of overcharging quickly disappear. With the accumulator as an instrument for the absorption of concentrated Orgone energy, it is therefore possible to supply the organism with more energy than it can bear in terms of its charging capacity. The experience itself is generally harmless if one does not expose oneself to it for hours at a time or already has severe overcharging illness. Therefore, you should avoid sleeping in an accumulator or under an Orgone blanket without careful preparation. Overcharging is comparable to mild sunstroke. If overcharging does occur, go for a walk in the fresh air, preferably with the wind blowing. Or take an extended lukewarm bath in a bathtub, as water is able to attract and bind energy. In the case of severe overcharging or after DOR contacts, it is good to take a full bath after adding a pound each of sea salt and sodium bicarbonate to the water. The dosage of accumulator sessions. How long should one sit in an Orgone energy accumulator? You should observe your own perceptions closely to find out when overcharging sets in. If the sensations are pleasant, it is good to use the ORAC. Some people experience a feeling of fright when they first experience the illumination, which many people have not experienced for a long time. Even this experience is generally fine. In the beginning, it is best to go into the accumulator often and not for too long, perhaps 20 to 30 minutes several times a day. The organism then learns faster how to deal with the new energetic situation than if you go in once for a long time. Those who are very undercharged may not have any special perception at all during the first session. The organism must then recover energetically. It may need some time to get used to the charge in the accumulator. It then makes sense to go in often and briefly. Only long-term and regular charging in the accumulator ensures charging of your own optimal energetic level, and only continued use can maintain this. How often and for how long this should be varies from person to person. It can be 30 minutes a day or 5 minutes every 3 days. You must try to find out. Factors influencing the Orgone charge in the accumulator. The number of double layers. At the beginning of research into the medical effects of the accumulator, Wilhelm Reich was initially of the opinion that only 3-layer devices should be used without medical supervision. Dr. Walter Hope, however, already used 20-layer Orgone accumulators in the 50s, and at the end of the 70s he recommended his psychiatric patients to use 10 to 20-layer devices. Stronger devices charge much faster, so people who have rather weak energy systems or who use an accumulator for medical reasons should use these. Those who tend to be overcharged, or those with cardiovascular disease, or who are prone to overcharging should use a 3 to 5-layer unit. The perceptibility of specific phenomena does not necessarily have anything to do with the strength of the device, but primarily with the disposition of the organism and other, more atmospheric conditions. To solve the problem of needing to use weaker or stronger accumulators, you can go into the ORAC with an Orgone blanket, which intensifies its effects considerably, or use additional elements to strengthen the ORAC if necessary. The atmospheric situation. The second important factor is the charge of the atmosphere. Look at the sky and notice the humidity when going into the accumulator. The differences are impressive and easy to understand. The time of day. The charge in the atmosphere is highest at midday. It is lowest during dusk and dawn, and much lower at night. The energetic disposition of one's own organism. Your own basic energetic situation is always decisive for the charge in the accumulator. Those who have been in the open air on a clear, energetically highly charged day will experience the accumulator quite differently than those who have worked in an open-plan office under fluorescent tubes and in front of a screen. If someone is energetically poisoned, they should first detoxify by going for a walk or having a bath with salt and bicarbonate of soda. Those with high energetic levels will change quickly, where those with low energetic levels will take a few sessions to charge. Does everyone need an accumulator, or can some already have the optimal charge? Those who are organismically and energetically largely healthy, who move a lot in open air and in a healthy environment, who live in harmony with themselves and the social and natural environment, have good prerequisites for being healthy. Therefore, they have no need for Orgone energy treatment. Although many use the accumulator because it's fun and an added extra pleasure to life. The emotional disposition. There are people who cannot use the Orgone energy accumulator for emotional reasons. The basis of a defensive attitude is generally the lust-fear, as Wright called the great fear of emotional excitement. The very intimate energetic touch in the accumulator is often experienced by very energetically congested people as too direct, leading them to become afraid. Other characters may start making silly jokes or seemingly factual arguments against the accumulator. Many refuse to even consider sitting in it themselves. Others absolutely want to sit all kinds of people in it, except themselves. According to the motto, what helps others will eventually convince me too. And when everybody is healthy, I will be too. It is best to be open-minded and let your own experiences and results convince you. Geographical and cosmic factors. Factors that bring a stronger Orgone charge to the atmosphere are increased sunspot activity, full moon, and new moon. Weather and environmental factors. Every weather situation brings with it a specific orgotonic charge of the atmosphere. Before a thunderstorm, the effect of the Orgone accumulator may be completely cancelled. In the same way, fog or extreme DOR weather conditions can impair the charge in the Orgone energy accumulator or make it completely impossible. Follow your own feeling and be able to judge critical borderline situations. Train your perceptions in the accumulator from the outset. The ideal place to set up the accumulator is a wooden hut in a sunlit forest meadow, far away from nuclear power plants, nuclear and other weapon depots, high voltage power lines, X-ray facilities, busy roads, factories of all kinds, television, radio, radar and cell phone transmitters, computer screens, fluorescent tubes, or even without any electrical equipment and without a radio telephone. Also without chemical environmental toxins from agriculture and with as little DOR pollution as possible. Those who find such an environment can consider themselves extremely lucky. Only one thing should be considered. The charge in the Orgone accumulator is in the amplification of the energy process that is constantly taking place between the organism and the atmosphere anyway. If the Orgone accumulator has a toxic effect because of certain environmental influences, then the environment is unsuitable for living beings even without the accumulator. Every person must weigh up for themselves in which environmental pollution they have or want to live in, and decide whether they can operate an Orgone accumulator there. If the answer is no, then look for a new place to live. Clothing and other factors. When using the accumulator, you should be as lightly dressed as possible, as heavy clothing specially made out of wool and plastic form a superfluous insulating layer that may delay the charging process. Since the body temperature usually rises somewhat and one thus develops a feeling of warmth, light clothing is recommended. There is no reason to go in completely unclothed. The organism is used to clothing and can normally integrate it into its energy system. If the accumulator is in a cold room, you can start off dressed in warmer clothes and then gradually remove the clothing as you become more comfortable. It is not advisable to enter the accumulator sweating, especially sweating profusely, as this can cause the plates to mist up. Hot, steaming drinks should also not be taken inside because of the increase in humidity. The moisture immediately condenses on the relative cold plates, and this can absorb the charge, so that the Orgone energy accumulator must first be allowed to dry inside before it can be used again. You should also wear shoes, or slippers, as the floor plate quickly oxidizes from the sweat of feet. Therefore, you should not necessarily walk into it with just socks, as those do not stop the sweat. So that the floor plate doesn't oxidize, you can put a sheet metal or wire grid made of galvanized iron or steel in it as a doormat. This is recommended in accumulators that are used by many people. Enter the Orgone energy accumulator with clean hands, as sweaty, greasy hands and dirt or food are all unfavourable. Galvanized steel sheets within the Orgone accumulator are highly sensitive to oxidization and will quickly degrade when they meet grease and sweat. Disturbances due to information transfer. The Orgone energy accumulator may hold the energy of previous users, especially if used by multiple people. It is advised that the device is cleaned regularly after use with a damp cloth. This removes old energy fields and allows new, fresh ones to form. In general, the charge in the Orgone energy accumulator is harmless if one avoids strong overcharging, because Orgone charging is the body's own biophysical function and not foreign radiant energy. Counterindicated are all diseases that indicate chronic overcharging. In those cases, use of the Orgone accumulator must be discouraged, and it would make sense to monitor the accumulator application Orgone medically. In these cases, the use of strong Orgone accumulators must be discouraged. Signs of chronic overcharging are long-lasting strongly decreased blood pressure, disease due to vasoconstriction, hysterical characters, unhealed heart defects, brain tumours, atriosclerosis, stroke even after the acute attack, skin inflammations, and eye conjunctivitis. In all these cases, the accumulator should not be used at all during acute symptoms of illness. After recovery from the symptoms, if at all, it should only be used in very short sessions and in very weak, 3-layer devices. From the Orgone energy accumulator by Wilhelm Reich, the length of the sessions can be slowly increased from time to time until you are sure that no collapse, which can be caused by sudden contraction, bursting of blood vessels, vegetative shocks, suspension of the heartbeat are quite possible if overcharging in 10 years of using Orgone energy, but the possibility cannot be completely excluded. One should be especially vigilant in the case of high blood pressure, as this could react to the expanding vagitonic influence of Orgone energy and with a sudden increase rather than decrease in pressure. Contraindicated are all treatments with antibiotics and cortisone. These drugs are supposed to regulate certain bodily dysfunctions. You may think what you like of them, but if you carry out such a treatment, it must be carried out thorough and to the end accordingly. The organism reacts to toxins with defense reactions. In the accumulator, this defense is strengthened considerably under certain circumstances. so that the simultaneous application of the Orgone energy accumulator could put in one the situation of having fought and broken down the medicinal protection without having already developed a strong immune defense. Furthermore, treatment with immunosuppressive medication, cortisone, and simultaneous treatment with the accumulator, which strengthens the immune defense, would be the application of mutually cancelling methods. From the Orgone energy accumulator by Wilhelm Reich. Never mix orgone treatment with other chemical treatments. Orgone is a strong energy force. We do not know what consequences such a mixture can have. Vitamins, oral iron compounds, penicillin, and other medicines of biological origin are compatible with orgone energy. On the other hand, even the smallest number of inorganic components, such as sulfonomides, should not be administered under any circumstances, either externally or internally, as they inhibit the regeneration process that has been vindicated by orgone energy. The Orgone shooter and further constructions. Wilhelm Reich developed a small orgone energy accumulator which has the function of treating small areas of the body such as cuts, burns, fractures, and etc. in a targeted way. The charge is conducted from the inner sheet to the outside via the BX cable, a metal hose made of galvanized iron which is coated with plastic on the outside. Funnels made of galvanized iron can then be attached to the end of the hose, in the size corresponding to the body part to be treated. Without such an additional contact surface, the shooter acts as a spot radiator. The mode of action of the Orgone shooter corresponds completely to that of the larger accumulator. The two energy fields, i.e. the strong body field and the relatively weak field of the inner plates of the shooter, merge with each other, and the organismic orgone field of the person being treated is charged. The shooter can be used as a small accumulator for experiments, example sprout experiments, or for charging drinking water or food. The Orgone energy accumulator. Scientific responsibility. Wilhelm Reich worked on the sexual and libido functions of the human being from 1922, and on research into orgone energy from 1939 until his death in 1957. He always placed himself and his work uncompromisingly at the service of the living, and never subordinated himself to commercial interests or a career. He separated from people and institutions that demanded scientific compromises from him, and there were many of these kinds of separations in Reich's scientific becoming. To many, he seemed peculiar in his inflexibility and stubborn adherence to his own objectives, and rumours were circulated, especially by disappointed former friends and collaborators, about his state of mind and supposedly unqualified scientific work. Hardly any scientist of the 20th century has been attacked as much as Wilhelm Reich. His books were burned not only by the Nazis, but also at the instigation of the American Food and Drug Administration. A spiteful press, maliciously distorting the facts, has literally hunted down this researcher in Norway and in the USA, who did not develop bombs or warfare agents, but who discovered life energy and a simple device that helped people to support life functions. The US judiciary banned the accumulators and all of his literature because Reich declared the court not competent to rule on natural laws, and he consequently refused to play the game of legal tricks. Reich was then disregarded by the judgment against him. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison at almost 60 years old. Reich had already been seriously ill with heart disease since the Orgone experiment. The atmosphere in the prison was detrimental to his condition. A few days before his early release, he died of heart failure. Wilhelm Reich took strict care to make sure his work was not misused by unserious practitioners, and no one presumed to hold pure opinions about orgonomy had not been acquired through orgonomic work and proper knowledge. From the Orgone energy accumulator by Wilhelm Reich. It happens again and again that orgonomic discoveries with diligence and carefully presented are met by pure opinions which have no basis in observations or experiment. When such opinions are expressed by a chemist or a doctor, the layman accepts them as an authority decision, no matter whether the opinion is based on observation or not. This is how a false public opinion develops. Since authority is abused in a way in the interests of dishonest business practices or politics, we must insist that whoever expresses an opinion about medical or other application of orgone energy first prove that he has understood the rules for observing orgotonic functions. both in terms of therapeutic developments and the misuse of his name, his warnings and claims were not unjustified. After his death, those who were related to his work in terms of content were split in many directions, forming sectarian groups. Some sincerely claim to be the only qualified orgone therapists and roundly accuse others who work just as seriously as frauds. Reich's legacy is scientific, social, and humanistic knowledge that does not belong to anyone, even if someone claims it does. One final thing. Don't just ask any doctor, therapist, or alternative practitioner what they think of an orgone energy accumulator if they are not thoroughly familiar with it. As Reich said in his book, The Orgone Energy Accumulator, a doctor is not an authority on the orgone energy accumulator unless they have diligently studied the accumulator, used it regularly, felt the subjective reactions, and measured the objectable functions. Therefore, there are no other authorities in the field of orgonomy except those who have continuously studied the orgone energy functions. Orgone devices. Orgone devices are not inventions in the true sense of the word. They have arisen from experimental observations where they reproduce natural phenomena. Wilhelm Reich systematically researched the properties of life energy. Based on his observations, he created an apparatus to influence life energy in such a way that they trigger certain healing processes. Reich noticed inexplicable luminescent phenomena in biological specimen. To exclude feedback from radio waves, he placed the specimens in metal boxes, which he used as Faraday cages, electrical isolation chambers. But the glow effect became even stronger as a result. When he investigated this phenomena more closely, he found that there was a free energy in the atmosphere that could be concentrated, extremely stimulating the immune system and triggering healing reactions. This was the birth of the Orgone Energy Accumulator, ORAC. Reich then constructed various devices that would make these biophysical effects applicable for use on humans and animals. First the ORAC to sit in, then a local application, the shooter, and orgone blankets for bedridden patients. It was just before Reich's death that he pointed out it was not only possible to accumulate orgone energy in the organism, but it was also possible to specifically withdraw energy from the organism. He used the property of orgone energy to form close bonds with water. He used metal pipes and metal hoses to exploit the principle of conducting energy into flowing water. The Orgone Energy Accumulator, or ORAC. Wilhelm Reich's central development was a cabin made of galvanized sheet iron surrounded by insulating material, wood fiber insulation boards. Between these two layers, further layers of conductors, steel wool, and insulators, polyester wadding or virgin wool. The more of these alternating layers the accumulator has, the stronger the effect, which is that a spatial energy field is created on the inner walls. In it, the energy field of living beings can charge itself with an unlimited amount of energy. The ORAC is built in such a way that the plates are as close to the body as possible without ever touching the walls. The space in front of the chest and pelvis or above the thighs is reduced by a variable shield or a small orgone blanket. A small accumulator, shooter, can be placed under the seat so that simultaneous local application is possible. The internal dimensions: approximately 120 to 140 centimeters high, 65 to 75 centimeters deep, 55 to 65 centimeters wide. Thickness of the walls: approximately 28 millimeters, 500 millimeters with 100 double layers. It can be quickly assembled and disassembled with further joints. The outside is made of fabric-covered insulating panels. The inner materials are steel wool and polyester wadding. ORAC variants. The folding ORAC. The folding ORAC is an accumulator whose large parts have been divided in the middle and connected with hinges. This makes it possible to fold it very small and easier to transport, e.g. in any normal car boot. This is available as a standard ORAC and as an angel energy accumulator. Despite the design, this accumulator is as stable as any other ORAC. The entire ORAC folded, for example, to the dimensions of approximately 60 by 70 by 50 centimeters. The daybed ORAC. For many users, lying in the ORAC is more comfortable than sitting in one. The daybed ORAC should be adapted to the body dimensions of the tallest user. Smaller people can then reduce the interior space with orgone cushions and blankets. since you should not lie directly on a metal sheet. An Orgone mattress, approximately 4 cm high foam mat with an Orgone blanket mattress cover, is included in the size of the bottom, which is up to 200 by 60 centimeters. The Orgone tunnel. The Orgone tunnel is a very effective, simple construction. It combines the advantages of the daybed Aurak with those of an Orgone bed with 2 Orgone blankets. The Orgone tunnel is a light construction from thin wood slats over which an approximately sized Orgone blanket is stretched and fixed with Velcro. In addition, you lie comfortably on an Orgone mattress. It is suitable for bedridden and mobility impaired people. It can be quickly dismantled and stored in a cardboard box. When folded, it measures approximately 100 by 60 by 25 centimeters. The Angel Energy Accumulator. The Angel Energy Accumulator, or Rose Quartz Accumulator, is an Orgone energy accumulator that becomes a rose quartz energy field through 8 large rose quartz crystals built into it. It is a spiritual variant of the Aurak, which became known in 1996 through mediumist conversations with Wilhelm Reich. The rose quartz accumulator builds up this energy field with only the frequency of the rose quartz. As a result, only very pure energy levels are amplified. Rose quartz stands for love. It can create a connection between human and the divine or cosmic quality of love. It offers a place of peace and self-encounter, where one can meet divine love. It creates a frequency of healing, of holiness, a sacred place. The Aurak 4-2. This Aurak is a variant that allows 2 individuals to sit inside together. It is an angel energy accumulator for meditation. It is approximately 100 by 100 by 100 centimeters inside. You can also lie quite comfortably in this accumulator as well as sleep for a short time. The Aurak for food. This small 5-layer quartz rose accumulator has the dimensions of a refrigerator and fits under a kitchen worktop. Food can be treated and energetically upgraded in it after shopping, as well as drinking water. External dimensions are approximately 81 centimeters high, 65 centimeters wide, 55 centimeters deep. Inner dimensions approximately 60 centimeters high, 55 centimeters wide, and 45 centimeters deep. The Orgone Shooter. The normal shooter with 5 to 10 double layers measures 30 by 30 by 30 centimeters. As mentioned before, it is used for localized treatment of fractures, wounds, and such injuries as burns, tumors, and inflammation. Disclaimer: this is not meant to replace medical advice. Don't depend on ergonomic devices to save you from deadly diseases or severe physical injuries. The Orgone Blanket. Wilhelm used Orgone blankets for bedridden patients who were too weak or limited in movement to use the Aurak. It is not as spatial as the Aurak and arises from the large surface area of the steel wool fibres in the blanket, so the experience of merging that is typical of the Aurak is often missing, which is clearly noticeable in perception. These blankets are well suited for treatment of children and animals. They can be used for long-term treatments and as a supplement to the Aurak when travelling. The blanket only charges the body where you cover yourself with it. Where there is no blanket, there is no direct charge, but at best one charge indirectly via the blood circulation. The Orgone Sleeping Bag. The dimensions are approximately 180 over 80 centimeters. You can roll up the Orgone sleeping bag to take with you when travelling. However, rolling up should only be done seldom because the steel fibres can break through the frequent movement. So the less often you roll up or crumple Orgone blankets, pillows and sleeping bags, the longer you can enjoy them. The Orgone Mattress Topper. Orgone mattress toppers are stretched like mattress protectors with elastic bands at the corners onto the mattress under a cotton-fitted sheet that is thin as possible. They are helpful if you also cover yourself with an Orgone blanket, so that you can sandwich between the two. Orgone Quilted Cushion and the Mini Orgone Pad. Small and flat Orgone cushions are used on minor injuries, burns, abrasions and bruises. Some people have used them as first aid. Again, don't take this in place of real medical advice. The Orgone Belt. Very flat Orgone pillows for continuous use on the body for minor injuries and post-surgery. With 3 double layers of steel wool and polyester, they are strong enough to achieve the desired effect and thin enough to be worn under clothes. They are affixed with Velcro straps. Warning against the use of metals other than iron and galvanized iron. Wilhelm Reich pointed out in his book, The Discovery of Orgone, the Big C Biopathy, that orgone energy accumulators must be built of iron. Also in his book, The Orgone Energy Accumulator, Its Scientific and Medical Use, he wrote, "For medical purposes, only iron may be used. Other researchers have confirmed this research." Unfortunately, these warnings are often not taken as seriously as they need to be, especially as pseudo-orgone devices are repeatedly put on the market that are made of unapproved materials. Other people are confused by this, as materials such as aluminium and copper are unacceptable. This can have serious consequences. Since pure iron rusts, and rust is an organic coating, that would considerably hinder an orgone charge. Only galvanized iron sheet is used for the inner sheets and pure steel wool. Other materials contain toxic properties including tin plate, stainless steel, steel wire mesh, or even copper and aluminium foil. Self-construction of orgone devices. Orgone devices such as Aurochs and orgone cushions are quite simple devices, and are made of commonly available materials that can be made at your home if you just know how they work. Always remember to use the correct materials when constructing such devices. Making your own orgone wound pads. Quick wound and pain care. You can get some fine steel wool from the DIY store, 200-gram pack of the finest grade, as well as some combed wool or better polyester fleece in a needle workshop. Cotton wool can also be used. For the cover fabric, use thin cotton, linen or nappy fabric if possible. Sew cushion covers in the required sizes, from 4 by 4 inches to 15 by 15 inches. Cut steel wool into the required sizes plus 3 inches. Then spread out the steel wool by carefully pulling it apart from a braid. Lay layers of steel wool and polyester fleece or wool on top of each other. For wound pillows, 3 layers of steel and 3 layers of fleece or wool are sufficient. Sew the layers on top of each other. Over the last layer of steel or wool is just the thin cotton fabric. This side comes to the body. Building instructions for a standard orgone accumulator. The number of double layers. For people who do not suffer from energy overload diseases, it is recommended to construct an accumulator with about 7 to 10 layers. Those who are weakly charged can also certainly use a 20 to 30 double layer accumulator. The effectiveness of orgone accumulators depends not only on the number of layers, but also on the extent of the whole area where metal and insulator touch each other. The fineness of the steel wool as well as the polyester wool and the skillful spreading of the materials in the accumulator's walls needs to be equal. So it is not the thickness of the layers that matters, but rather that they are thin and touch each other as closely as possible. Dimensions. The dimensions should be so that someone can comfortably sit upright in the accumulator without touching the walls. For optimal charging effect, the body and walls are a few centimeters apart, because the energy field is created above the metal sheets. The smaller the accumulator is, if you sit comfortably in it, the more effective it is. Internal dimensions. The average interior dimensions for normal weight people up to 6 feet tall is 130 cm by 60 cm by 70 cm. The seat should be as low as possible because the highest seating position always means that the accumulator must be built higher, which increases the volume and reduces the effect accordingly. The orgone accumulator will be considerably more stable if the top section and bottom section are each indented half an inch between their side section and the back section. Both side parts and backs must be 1 inch longer than the inner height. Outer dimensions. The external dimensions are based on wood slats. The construction of the standard accumulator allows optimal use of the material, and the construction details can be applied to any wall thickness. It is recommended that the construction be made with approximately 0.7 inch thick boards. Per double layer, they calculate 0.2 to 0.3 inch frame width. An accumulator with 10 double layers should be made with boards approximately 2 to 3 inches wide. Frames. The frames are made of planed and sanded boards, screwed together with 4 screws each. You can also assemble them very well with a pneumatic nailer using 2 to 3 inch nails or staples. Since the metal sheets and insulation boards are screwed to them, the frames do not need their own stability and therefore do not need to be glued. The frames have the following dimensions. 2 side elements, 120.5 cm by 70.5 cm. 1 back element, 132.5 cm by 60 cm. 2 floor or ceiling elements, 70 cm by 60 cm. 1 door element, 135 cm by 62.5 cm. The door is constructed 2.5 cm higher and wider than the back element, so that it will completely cover the door opening of the Orgone energy accumulator in case the unit should turn a bit crooked or wobbly. If the door handle has the exact same measurement of the opening, any angular deviation, no matter how small, would be noticeable. The entire accumulator is designed so that the rear panel is indented about 5 mm between the side panels. This gives the unit sufficient stability despite its lightweight construction. Either make the floor and ceiling elements slightly smaller or attach a narrow strip to the back of each side element. Wood fibre insulation boards. You'll need 3 wood fibre insulation boards, each 10 mm to 12 mm thick, measuring 250 by 120 cm. They are screwed into the frame with wood screws approximately 0.75 to 1 inch after they have been filled. Wait until you have screwed the metal sheets to the frame before cutting the wood board size along the wood frame, so that they can be cut to fit exactly. To do this, place the element on the panel and cut along the frame with a box cutter. You can, if you have only smaller insulation boards or sections, join them together by cutting 2 boards with a wooden strip screwed underneath. Metal plates. You will need 3 to 4 sheets of galvanized iron sheets from 0.5 mm to a maximum of 0.75 mm thick. The thinner the sheets are, the easier they are to cut and machine. If possible, have the sheets cut to the size of a millimeter at a specialized store. If necessary, you can also use a jigsaw. However, do not use mechanical hand shears. Cut the metal plates to 0.2 to 0.4 inches, 5 to 10 millimeters, smaller than the frames in both length and width. Then deburr them, to prevent cutting yourself on the sharp edges. They are indented by about 2.5 to 5 millimeters each. The metal is punched through with a center punch and screwed on with small 2.5 by 16 mm screws using a cordless screwdriver. The metal plate for the door may be assembled from 2 places. From the upper small part you can cut out the window opening. Otherwise, you will need to build a wooden frame about 8 inches by 8 inches for the opening in the door, and cut a corresponding opening in the sheet metal for the door. To build the opening, look to the figure. The drawing is self-explanatory. Shields or blanket and pillow. Wilhelm Reich built shields into each of his Orgone accumulators that could be placed in front of his chest and pelvis. For this purpose, appropriate strips must be attached to the side elements. However, it has been found that an Orgone pillow suspended in the back and slightly larger Orgone pillow placed in front of one's chest gives better results. You can lean on an Orgone pillow. Without an Orgone pillow on your back, you would have to sit upright in the Orgone accumulator without leaning against it, which can be uncomfortable in the long run. The Orgone pillow can also be used outside the accumulator. The shields are constructed from 2 hardwood fibre boards, 20 to 30 cm by 59.5 cm, in a way that they fit exactly between the panel's sides, but you can still move them easily. Ideally, they are held in place by the slight curvature of the metal sheets of the side panels. The hardboard sheets are screwed onto wooden strips. The sheets are cut slightly smaller, and the frames are filled with 2 layers each of steel wool and insulation wool. Then the metal sheets are grained and screwed on. The shields are joined together with 2 small hinges and then placed in the finished accumulator on the appropriate strips so that the sheet metal side face the body when they are unfolded. Thanks for watching. This video was very strenuous to create, so please like, share and subscribe.